for opening us up with spirit today.
Great. Well, bonjour. Magazi Dordem. Wedo Kaza Bajgot Indigenous. Wasoxing Dunji. Gay Wade and Zibi na Dunjaba. Jaman Gay Parwad Me and Dow. Chimigwach can get go gajik top. Nishan Gishgat. Chimigwach also kanak. Chimigwach Wabanomado, Jawanomado, Benchmark Mado, Given Mado. Chimigwach Eki. Chimigwach Nimki Benesh. Chimigwach Majika. Chimigwach Mashomas, Nokomas, Manan Bojo, Nanwabe, Swabe, Nisha de Shikaka, Mamagua, Swine, and Shnabe Suck. At this time, we give our acknowledgements to the one who has created everything and everyone for this good day. And we give our acknowledgements as well to what we describe as the Madok, or the guardians of the four directions, and many beings within our creation stories. And we give acknowledgements to those ones that have come before us. And we also give acknowledgements as well to our grandmothers and grandfathers. So at this time, we ask that everybody can enjoy themselves, and we say Gitchi Miigwech for everybody joining us today, and that we can focus on the tasks that we have on hand today. So say Gitchi Miigwech for everybody coming.
Miigwech, Wendy. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone to the IMN Ontario NEIHR Indigenous Knowledge's virtual exchange, which is being hosted by the Waakabaness Indigenizing Health Symposium, our 11th annual symposium on Indigenous health. My name is Suzanne Stewart, and I'm from the Yellowknife Dene First Nation. I am the academic lead on the Ontario NEIHR, and I'm here with all of my teammates on the Ontario NEIHR, as well as a bevy of IMN students whom I'm excited to get to know better over the next 2 days. And I'd like to welcome everyone, panelists and participants alike, to our event. And this event is very special. It's not special only because it's our first online event, but that of course makes it special and allows us to connect with more people from far and wide. But it's also special in that it's the first gathering of the Ontario NEIHR, and it's the first gathering in which we're also bringing together the new emerging young leaders that we're all mentoring to work with us and to eventually take our place in our journey to indigenize health in its many different disciplines. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this, and I feel really humbled to be in the company of our traditional knowledge keepers, our elders, our healers, our traditional teachers, our academic teachers, our youth, all of the people who make this wonderful NEIHR and IMN group. And it feels to me like we're just a real family coming together with common desires and interests to improve the health and well-being of our people through our work and through our passions around health and mental health. So that being said, I'm not going to say too much more because I know we're really excited to get to the panels. So each year for 11 years, the Waakabaness Bryce has hosted an Indigenizing Health Symposium, and it's taken different forms every year. And as I said, this year is our first year that we are online virtually. Each year in the past, we've gathered in downtown Toronto with one of our community partners at the location of one of our community partners in the gymnasium of the Native Canadian Centre of Toronto, where we've usually had about 120 participants come to see 5 panelists speak in a day-long conference with 5 keynotes, and a panel or a conversation cafe at the end. And almost everyone who is actually at this event today on the NEIHR has been a keynote speaker at the Indigenizing Health Symposium at one point or more over the 11 years. And I think those many events are some of the events that led us to be able to work together on this Indigenous Health Research Network that is regional to Ontario, but we have national and international reach and linkages, which we want to continue to expand as we grow our network over the next 5 years. So I'm going to invite our first moderator to panel one to introduce the panel and to talk a little bit about what's going to happen in panel one, and that is Randy Ray, a PhD student from Nipissing University. Randy?
Hani Bosho, Giwede Nodenkwe Indigenous Slang Post Minwana Swakmak Dunjba. My name is Randy Ray, and I am a PhD student working with the brilliant Dr. Cindy Pelletier at Nipissing University, and I'm very excited to be here to have and listen to these conversations of a lot of brilliant academics that I've based some of my work on and also have had the privilege of being mentored by throughout my PhD journey. So miigwech for that. Today we are going to have some lovely conversations with Dr. Rod McCormick, Dr. Lynn Lavallee, Dr. Maile M. Taualii, Dr. Chantel Richmond, Dr. Angela Mashford Pringle, and again, the elder Wendy Phillips. Miigwech for your kind words and starting us off in such a lovely way today, this afternoon. I know that we're going to have great conversations on Indigenous land-based and planetary health solutions. As we mentioned, there will be five minutes for each panelist. I will be monitoring the chat box on the side. So if anyone has any questions, I can then direct them to the panelists themselves. So if the participants want to be a little more specific on who they're asking a question to, that would be helpful. But we can also do general kind of conversations at the end if your questions are more broad. So I think we'll start off with Dr. Rod McCormick.
Thank you, and thank you, Wendy, for the welcome and prayer. I've only done this once on Zoom before, so hopefully this works. Slideshow. There we go. You guys all see this? So yeah, just in keeping with our theme of land-based healing, I thought I'd just share a little bit about what I'm doing, and I'm going to get a 1-minute warning in 4 minutes, so I better hustle through these. So I'm looking at traditional teachings with regards to healing and using the land, and I just thought I'd start just with elder from the East Coast and one from the West Coast. So Medina Marshall talks about relationship with medicine, and it's not just a physical relationship, but it's goes beyond that. So not just where are the plants and how do you use them, but personal connection to the medicine, respect for the medicine, and then the sacred nature of the medicine. Some of you might know her partner, Albert Marshall, who he's the person that many people quote around the 2 I see. But here's a quote of his that I like: species possess rights, humans possess responsibilities. On the West Coast, Elder Alan White from Snuneymuxw First Nations. I was at a healing conference with men, and she was the only woman presenting, and she told them they all needed to take a shower. And she said, you guys are carrying too much heavy stuff and you need to wash it away. And you don't need to go up to the mountain stream and dunk 4 times. You can use the shower in the room. And but you need to approach it with the right attitude. You need to approach it with humility. And if you ask it in the right way, it will help you. So I'm very interested in this new area called zoopharmacognosy, but how animals heal themselves. But that is more, a lot of the work that I've done has looked at how people heal themselves with nature. And this is somewhat different because we're observing animals here, which is what we did at the very beginning. So it's not exactly a modern science. But it's just interesting. And I think, but in the area of mental health, it's much more difficult because we can't talk to the animals. However, in observing, this is a famous, the famous polar bear video. And they found that when they would tranquilize polar bears, they'd chase them with helicopters, and it's all very traumatic. So they could relocate them or tag them. And they noticed that they all would shake for a few minutes after they wake up. So this became something that people looked into, and they found that it's actually a great way to release trauma from the body. So that's something that interests me, is to look at how animals heal themselves emotionally and spiritually. A little hard to study, but it's something I'm interested in. Last thing is I'll just talk about the course I ran and always wanted to run, and it got canceled this last summer due to COVID, but it might be on at the end of next summer, fingers crossed. And that is based on work that I've done in observing how people use nature. I found that it can be grounding, calming, cleansing. It provides guidance, perspective, and empowerment. So this was a 5-day course, grad level course last summer, or the summer before. Day 1 was trees and forests. Day 2, rivers. 3, lakes and waters, plants and earth, hills and mountains. And so we actually climbed into a bus and went to those places. Thanks, 1 minute. The students, this is up one of the mountains, really enjoyed this course. For some of them, it was the last course they took in their grad program, and they said it was the most impactful. Worked with an elder who knew much more about the land here, because I'm not from here, in teaching the course. And yeah, so that, if you're interested in that course, it's actually, we can fund so many seats for mentorship students, as well as locally. So I'll stop there. I think I've used my time up. Yeah, thank you.
Miigwech for that. I think that we'll leave the questions for the end and continue the conversation with the panelists. And Miigwech for your words. Dr. Lynn Lavallee, we would love to hear your knowledge.
Sorry about that. Miigwech Randy and Wendy for the traditional opening, and to Suzanne for bringing us all together. Bonjour, Anine, Tanzi, hello, Minidunebe Kwe Indishnakaz, Wawashkiji and Dodam, Sudbrin Dinjaba, Nindawe Magda, Nindag, Nindujaba, Swan Lake, Timiskaming Timmins, Anishinaabe Métis Kwe and Dow. The focus of my current and future energy, and I don't want to say the word work because it's beyond work, but that is to advocate for more funding to ensure the next generation of healers, ceremonialists, and traditional teachers to be supported to do the important work with Indigenous peoples. What I will speak to you briefly today about is the visioning, not the specifics, as that would go well beyond our 5 minutes. There's a tremendous need for our own healing practices that always have included and been fundamentally woven with the land. We have healed with the land forever. The healthcare system is literally killing us. Take, for example, Joyce Echequan, Brian Sinclair, and members of my own family. My sister Kim, who in 2013 was overdosed by a methadone physician in Midland, Ontario. The autopsy was clear, and as was the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons' 7-page letter, yet the outcome was more education for the physician that killed her. I know many and almost most Indigenous people on Turtle Island and beyond have similar stories. Have you ever set foot in a detox facility or rehab facility? And I'm not talking about the Betty Fords, but the places where our people go who can't afford the luxury rehab centers. These places are not working. The 28-day treatment programs are not working. The detox facilities that you have to get on a waiting list for are not working. We need our own healing lodges, our own detox and rehab lodges on the land where people can come together, gather their feathers, add to their bundles, so they can try to be in a better way in this world that is so harsh at times. A few years ago, I did a project at the request of community, speaking with healers and shkabewis, or helpers, primarily in Ontario, asking about their thoughts on how to ensure the next generation of healers. Unequivocally, everyone agreed that we need to do something to carry on this knowledge. As many of you know, not everyone can be or has the gift to be a healer, and those with certain gifts are supported in community, starting off as shkabewis and learning from their teachers. But there are significant challenges with this today, primarily economic. While there are resources put in place for the next generation of doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers, there is little, if any, infrastructure or support for people with these healing gifts to learn into the next generation. We need Indigenous healing centers led by Indigenous healing practices and knowledge that is supported by these so-called efforts of reconciliation. That's the reconciliation we need. We need sovereignty when it comes to our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being, which is tied to the land. We can never have enough until the health statistics are on par with non-Indigenous people, until suicide is non-existent, until there is no longer genocide of Indigenous women, girls, two-spirit, trans, non-binary, and men. We need the ability for Indigenous persons, no matter where they live, to be able to access healing lodges, go to ceremony, go to Sundance, go to fasting, learn from traditional people on how to be in this world in a good way. Minawadazi or Mino Bimatswin, Miigwech. Hi, Alma Relations.
Miigwech, Dr. Lavallee, I could not agree more with everything that you said. Sorry, so eloquently. Like, that was fantastic. Dr. Maile Taualii, seems like you have your slideshow, so I'm really excited to see what is up next. And someone did ask the question whether or not the slides would be shared. So I think that is something that perhaps maybe the team can answer next, but I agree it would be great.
Ulu kinio ke akua, ulu kane me kanaloa, ulu lauhia lau koa me ka ie, a e mai ano hoi kokua, e a ka waila, e vai e ola no hue, aloha e, aloha e. Aloha. Aloha. My name is Maile Taualii, coming to you from the island of Oahu in Hawaii. Thank you so much for asking me to join you folks. Mahalo to Suzanne for asking a Native Hawaiian to be part of this amazing journey with you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking today about the project that I'm actually doing with you folks. And it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So these are my slides. The title of my project is called Understanding and Overcoming the Increasing Barriers of Ceremony. This is a English name. The traditional people who I'm working with are currently in the process of finding out what the proper name of the project will be, but it's theirs to name and theirs to control. So I'm waiting for that name from them. This image is from a traditional ceremony of us recently, about 2 years ago, before COVID. And you can see all of us in yellow that's dyed with olena or turmeric. And then all of us are wearing, and it's about 1,000 people who are wearing a full set of ferns that are gathered from the forest. And I'm going to talk about the challenges we face with that. This is my community partner, Na Puale Oliko Lehua, a hula halal that is over 40 years old, generations and generations passed down. And this is currently led by this beautiful woman in the middle, Kumuniuli Ihaini, who is my kumuhula, as well as my 3 daughters who dance for it as our community. Kuahu is the word is for our word for altar. It's a place that when we when we practice ceremony, we bring the gods into our bodies and into space with us. And a kuahu is an altar where garlands are put that are specifically found and used because they are what we call kinolau, or body forms of our gods. It's not just any type of fern, it's specific ones that grow in specific places. We also consider our bodies also part of that altar, and that's why Hawaiians wear garlands on their head and their necks. And this is a photo of me dressing my daughter before ceremony. This is a fern called palapalai. Where it grows is about 4,000 feet above sea level currently. And this is because of all the development and the change in our environment. It's very difficult for us to access what is existing. And we've lost a lot of our traditional knowledge on how to grow these things closer to where we reside. So those 1,000 people on all the islands have to travel to places for hours, hiking up on little paths like these to gather what is usually, in order to supply your entire halau, everyone carries a garbage bag full of ferns, and it's heavy, it's difficult work, and you have to time this because you want that lei to look fresh. And so you can't just pick it any time. You got to pick it right before ceremony. The ceremony was a flight away, so we had to plan ahead. I have a minute left. So this is what we're defining as barriers. Maybe not able to access the physical space, not able to get the traditional plants, not having the knowledge or access to the practitioners. And the study that we're doing is to study this relationship, how stressed we feel and how limited we feel when we can't access the ceremonial plants we need. So this pilot study that we're doing is we're gonna actually give hula practitioners the plants, the knowledge, the training, and the ability to grow these ceremonial plants in their home and in their areas. And that's what we're gonna study. We're gonna develop metrics in order to measure how their stress changes because they now have access to these traditional plants. Currently, there are no metrics, and so we're going to be designing some. And I have 4 seconds left, so I just want to say thank you. All of us are so excited to participate, so it's a pleasure. Mahalo.
McCormick, for your presentation and sharing your knowledge with us. I know I'm excited to hear about how the study goes and how it impacts the communities. Dr. Chantel Richmond, I'm so happy to be able to introduce you next.
Good afternoon. Hello. Bonjour. Gizis Koidishnakas, Makododem, Migit Gong Nishnabek, and Dunjaba. Anishinaabe and Dao. It's really great to be here. So wonderful to see all of our students from the Mentorship Network and so many of the new people that I'm getting to know through the NEIHR. So I'm really happy to be here to talk to you all from the perspective of geography. So I am a geographer by training. I am Anishinaabe from the start. And much of what I know and much of what I do comes from my connection to land and connection to our river, which is called the Big Tick. So I am originally from Northern Ontario and have come into, I think, the discipline of geographies of Indigenous health, or health geography, because of the things that I know as an Anishinaabe person and my care for the land, and seeing how we can use our connection, draw on our connections to the land as a means of supporting wellness in our communities. So geography and Indigenous geography has really kind of blossomed in the last 10 years. We're really focused on privileging Indigenous voices and perceptions about our own knowledge systems. We're engaging Indigenous people in research process, and very excited and really, I think, motivated by the idea that research ought to be rooted in our own goals of self-determination. And so we know Indigenous people around the globe share a common connection to their land and a relational worldview that I think is supported through our Indigenous knowledge system. So I start by showing this slide, which is a photo of our traditional territory, the heart of our traditional territory, which is the Big Tick. And like many other people, we are so close to this river that we've come to be known as this place. And one of the things that I think geographers and Indigenous geographers in particular are trying to understand and support is an improved understanding about how processes of dispossession from the land is permeating and I think leading to changes in health and wellness, right? And so we know that this happens as a result of our destabilized Indigenous knowledge systems because of our disconnection to land. But we know that these processes are not historic, they continue, and they have broad ranging impacts for health and wellness, right? So we see reduction in environmental confidence and knowledge, right? So as people actually step away from the land, it does limit opportunities to share, observe, practice Indigenous knowledge, uproots lives and livelihoods, contaminates foods, but also comprises our relational connection not only to the land, but to one another, which is really, I think, important for understanding our identities. And so we know that Indigenous communities in, well, globally, are drawing on research as a tool of self-determination. And I want to show this slide because it is, I think, at the very beginning of my career, and many in the room here, and including this woman right here, who's Juanita. She was a high schooler at the time that we started doing research in Beektagong. And she's now the Director of Lands and Sustainability. Another key person, Katie Big Canoe. She was just starting her master's research at this time and is now our longtime and much beloved research coordinator for the Mentorship Network. Land-based research is very important for restoring Indigenous knowledge and relational wellness. And we know this is very important for supporting young people to know where they belong, right? And we know that when people know where they belong, they're much healthier. So the last piece that I'll talk about is that our work in Indigenous geographies is about restoring and supporting communities with establishing their rights, right? And so we've been working on a global project with communities in Hawaii, as well as in Aotearoa, to establish and talk about the concept of environmental repossession. So to look at ways that Indigenous people are standing for the rights of their lands and territories, and ways that we can capture these stories and mobilize action in other communities. And that is what I have to share. Thank you for listening.
Chimigwich, lots of wonderful things that you have to share, and I always have a soft spot because that's from my territory, as you know, as well. So it's nice to see that. There are a few technical difficulties. I just want to confirm, I have only heard from 2 participants that they weren't able to see slides. And just to reiterate that it is being recorded and people will be able to see the slides afterwards as well. But just making sure people are viewing it that way. If there are slides next, I've only heard complaints, like I said, from a few. I think most of the participants can see them, which is great. So next we have Dr. Angela Mashford-Pringle. Welcome you to share your knowledge.
Good afternoon. Kwekwe, Tanzi, Bozo, Aloha. I'm just trying to learn all of the different, say hello in different languages, because our languages are also in danger and they come from our land. So it's very important for us to keep that connection to land, to keep our languages alive, and our cultures come from that land. So I want to speak a little bit to that. I want to thank Elder Wendy Phillips for opening and Dr. Suzanne Stewart for hosting all of us here so that we can at least briefly give some synopsis of what we're doing. So a lot of the work I've been doing in the last little while has been on cultural safety. And I've been creating a course or a bigger project on how to do cultural safety. And it feeds from the work that I've been doing at Walk Up and S. Bryce in terms of using the land as a teacher. So much like Dr. McCormick talked about and Dr. Richmond just talked about, I've been very keen on trying to find ways to have an entire master's program on the land. Because I think that the important part is if we can work on the land and we can teach not only Indigenous people how to get back to being with the land, that we can also teach our non-Indigenous allies how to be with the land. And I think that's extremely important, because if we don't do that, then we're only a small portion of the populations, and we are going to destroy the land, and Mother Earth needs a break. She definitely has given us every sign and indication that we need to change things. So with the Masters of Public Health and Indigenous Health at Waakapanas Bryce, I created a land-based course similar to what Dr. McCormick did. It's a 5-day intensive that all of our incoming MPH Indigenous Health students and all our collaborative specialization in Indigenous Health students at the University of Toronto take. And we have a variety of different elders that come and speak. This year, because of COVID, we did it online, which is not my preferred way, but we did do it online. And some of the elders you're going to hear from today and tomorrow were part of the people that helped out with doing the elders portion in the afternoon. Students were given some asynchronous videos this year, and then we did some live sessions, and then they had some outdoor activities to do. So I had students go out and do things, and I call myself the crazy professor because I ask all students to go out and find a tree to become a friend. And the reason I do this is our elders have told us for since time immemorial that we need to be befriending our nature. And since trees are often, at least in cities, planted in places where they're alone, we need to give them some love, because they can't reach underneath the ground to the next tree because they're in boxes or planters. And so it's really important for us to reach out as human beings and touch the tree and talk to the trees and become friends with the trees and make sure that other people are recognizing their worth. So I have students do that. I also have students take 30 minutes and go for a walk out in nature. And nature doesn't have to be in the bush. It's wonderful when we can get there, but we don't have to go that far. And it's important for you to understand that the land is still the land, whether it's sitting under concrete or it's not. And so I have tried very diligently to work within our program to provide that. We also have different people come in and talk in different classes so that we get some understanding of how other people relate to different lands, not just here in the Great Lakes region, but into different areas as well. And it's my hope that over time we'll be able to move from just having 1 or 2 land-based courses to having an entire curriculum. So we're working towards that. And the idea of that is that we need to build allies. We need people to understand why Indigenous people have such a strong affinity to being with and on the land. And the other piece that I think that follows through with what Dr. McCormick was talking about is we need to give rights to all of the plants, the animals, and the waters and the soil. We can't continue to live like we are without giving them any kind of rights. So they need to have the equivalent to personhood rights in order for us to change where we are and where we're going. Or in 7 generations from now, we won't have a planet to live on. And as Elder Clay Shirt has said to me many times, if we as humans all disappeared, the plant life, the animal life, the birds, the fish, they would all survive and thrive. It's us that are making the mess. So we need to figure out how we're going to clean up that mess. Miigwech, thank you, all my relations.
Miigwech for your insight. You're also amazing with your timing as well. It's incredible. And last but certainly not least, I'm very looking forward to hearing your wisdom once again, Elder Wendy Phillips.
I just gotta unmute myself here. And yeah, this is a very important topic, especially for this time that we're in. So I just wanted to mention that I'm very grateful to be part of the symposium, and very thankful for all the work that has gone into organizing this event, and very, very thankful to all of the students and organizers and staff that have been able to put this together. So very thankful. So say Miigwech. there's many concepts as to when we talk about Anishinaabe, and a lot of us are very familiar with our definition of Anishinaabe. And for us, when we look at it through our lens, that there's many definitions, and this is what makes our language, very complex. And that the idea is there's many different translations, and so there's a few there. Because of time, I'm not going to be going through them all, but I wanted to mention as to, it talks about that for us as human beings, that we're also water beings. So I really wanted to make that point of our connection to land. And for us as well, this is a very important aspect, is ethics. And, we can talk for days about this, and this is something that, for each of us that, we've all been students, and from a traditional aspect, it's very different how our traditional education is set up. And this is something, today that we face amongst learners, and how do we share knowledge in a good way. So there's a lot of things that we face, traditionally, as a student, our elders chose the students. So very different as to how practice is done today. And when we look at teachers and how they were supported, by community, and the grading was very different. For us, traditionally, it was 100% was a pass. So very different in today's standards. One of the things that when we talk about our creation story, there's many aspects to it, and this is what I wanted to mention for land-based education, and especially looking at health solutions, and looking at our planet and our duty and responsibilities as Anishinaabe or human beings, are taking care of our spirit, our body, our mind, but most importantly, understanding our laws. And these are for us what we describe them as: our great laws, our universal laws, our natural laws, and our tribal laws. And this is what governs all of us as human beings. And this is, what our elders used to talk about, is when we stop living within those laws, that's when suffering will begin. And so that's something for us today that, is a reminder as to this situation that we're in. And I also put this wheel up for us as a reminder of human beings, how to live, and live in a good way. And when I say Chibawamin, it's talking about the energy that we have. So I just wanted to mention a few, policies that we have internationally on DRIP. For us in Ontario here, we got the Human Rights Code that acknowledges our rights and things that we can do, and that there are current penalties that go on. But I just wanted to mention my closing that we do have land-based education, and this is something for us is based on our ceremonies. And this is Anishinaabe Lodge that I carry. This is a 64-foot. This was actually based on Native Child's current lodge in their main foyer downtown Toronto. There goes my timer, so I'm up. So I just wanted to mention, just in closing, that we have many different methods of teaching and learning, and as healers, like Lynn said, that we're in a crisis, and that's something we really need help with. And with COVID, that's something as to how do we do that moving forward in a good way. So I'll leave it at there, because I know time-wise that we're out of time, and I'd like to say again, Gitchi Miigwech to all of you for listening, and I'll pass it back. Miigwech.
Miigwech for that. I know I could definitely listen and learn from you all day. When you were talking about ethics, it reminded me of Elder and former Grand Chief Eddie Benton Benet, who we are all thinking about, I think, a lot, and the ethics of that right now as we learned of his journey to the spirit world. So Miigwech for that. There was one, I guess, shout out about how this important work that you're all doing has made its way to Ada, Oklahoma. And I know that there was someone who was very excited, Mary Chambliss, who was saying, keep doing the important work that you're doing. And I've asked if anyone has any specific questions for the panelists and haven't heard back yet. But if they don't, I have maybe one question that could, if that's helpful for the group. I'm not sure, Suzanne, if you'd like maybe me to ask a question. So thinking through everything you've shared, which it has been amazing to listen to, and your different perspectives, I guess maybe two parts. The question would be, what would be your biggest barrier to moving this work forward, potentially in one word or a few short words, and then followed by how you could overcome that in a few short words. So your biggest barrier to moving this work forward, and then how you envision in a perfect world to move that forward, if that's not too hard. Dr. Lavallee.
I think in one of the biggest barriers in having our knowledge acknowledged, right, and on par with other forms of knowledge. It's very difficult. So, you know, research can hopefully evidence that in a way that's acceptable with community, because in order to get funding for things, we require that that evidence. So I think it's just the lack of acceptance of our ways of knowing, being, and doing.
Great. Anyone else?
I would just say that it's usually funding that causes us not to be able to do things. But if we believe in it strongly, I think we should be able to overcome that barrier. And then the other thing is time. We just don't have enough time in every day to teach as many people as we probably all would like to, or to be out on the land as much as we would like to. Although arguably after COVID, I don't know that I ever want to return to an office, but that's just me.
Maile, did you want to go?
We don't have any barriers, except for the fact that it's usually the academic side of things that are now holding us up. We're still, once a community's decided they're going to run, they're ready to go. So, you know, oftentimes people say, oh, working in the community is so tough, it takes so long. Not the community that's taking long. It's the other aspects of it that sometimes hold us up. So the community is excited and they want it, and they want it now.
Miigwech for that. That answered the other part of the question around being there so perfect. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think that one answer, or one, I think, part of what I find to be a barrier in my discipline to do this work is the fact that I'm alone a lot of the time. And so as, you know, somebody who often sits at the margins of Indigenous geography, I love being in this place because I see faces that look like me, and I hear things that are familiar, and it fills me up. And then I go back to the places where I sit in the institution and I'm really isolated. And so I think a lot of times it's about having the bravery to speak up in those places. And like Suzanne said in the opening, to training more people to do this work, right? And bringing Indigenous kids in and keeping them, and not even kids, but bringing more Indigenous people into these spaces and showing them that they can belong here, even when there are interactions and things that suggest otherwise, right? I think that is one of the biggest barriers.
And solutions, right? Creating kind of more people and more spaces for the knowledge. So that's great. Always trying to leave it. One of my elders always teaches me to leave it on a positive. So that's why I asked the two-part question around barriers and then how to address them.
My colleagues explained it well, so I can't really add. I think just changing attitudes when it comes to the land and place, and changing the mainstream attitude that it's not a relationship of mastery and resource extraction, that the land is our teacher and our healer. And I think if we change the way we look at it and approach it with humility, then that will not only help us as humans, but help the earth to heal as well.
Fantastic. I do have two more questions, which is great. So the conversation is starting to engage a few more questions. One is, do you know of any training programs for healers? Anyone?
So I answered that for Dr. Shaw. Hi, Dr. Shaw.
Perfect.
And I think, from what I'm conceptualizing, the training program for healers, I don't think there can be really. We learn by, people being identified as having those gifts and then working with the Ishkabewis over being a Ishkabewis for decades. So, but other people might be aware, like sometimes you see things come out on the internet. But outside of that, I'm not aware of anything that I would acknowledge, I guess. So I don't know if others know of any.
Well, there's informal, traditional training, but it's not in universities, and it's not advertised or written about really. There was one years ago. I did a lit review for the Healing Foundation on traditional healing, and I think the Navajo had a college program of some sort, but it's not. Yeah, it's all. It's oral. it's not well advertised. Some of the countries in Africa are very well organized around their traditional healers, and they have organizations and standards and all that stuff. But for us, it's not held in institutions, and it's not well advertised.
Great. Miigwech, for your points. I would like the opportunity to have Elder Wendy Phillips have the last comment on any of the things that you've been hearing in the discussion, and to kind of end us on a good note, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just also wanted to mention as well your previous question as well as to barriers. For myself, like what I see as probably one of our greatest barriers is climate change. As a healer, we work with, like I'm not a medicine person, but we do have a few recipes that we do carry. And so it's very unfortunate now that a lot of them are rare medicines. And so that's something that we see, as the effects of climate change. It is having impacts now, and concerns for the future, that very, very concerns about the water and, and how that's affecting our ecosystem and being able to, have those resources for future generations to be able to continue what we talk about, to have a good life and be healthy, so that's honestly, that's what drives my research. That's what drives, for myself to do ceremony and to continue supporting research and innovation projects, is because I believe we need to work together. And, you know, so it's like these platforms and symposiums where we can share our thoughts and share our research and hopefully network to be able to move this forward. You know, I believe we can find those answers together, and, you know, to ensure that future generations will be healthy, you know. So to me, that's what I believe is, you know, the answer is education, you know, and to, you know, to think ahead. Like for us, you know, it's our responsibility for those future generations, you know, to ensure that they have the knowledge and the things that we have today. And so it's ensuring that those opportunities continue to exist. So for myself, that's why I try to support as much as I do, you know, and really try to help community and help other elders to really support them to ensure that we can have good health and long life and peace of mind. So I'll leave it at that. Miigwech.
Miigwech for your words. And miigwech for all of the panelists for all of your insight today. I know there was lots of great discussion and lots of wonderful learning. If you want to check out the chat box after, it is my turn now to introduce Riley Kennedy, who I got to meet yesterday, which is great. And he will now be the one to introduce the second panel. So Bamapi, miigwech for allowing me to be here, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Randy. Hello, everybody. My name is Riley Kennedy. I am Haudenosaunee from Oneida Nation of the Thames, and I grew up in the Niagara region. Completing my bachelor's degree, doing an honors double major in Indigenous Studies and Community Development with a certificate in Geographic Information Science. I'm hoping to pursue graduate studies in epidemiology or public health in the next few years after I finish my undergraduate degree. We will now move into our second panel with Dr. Goodwill, Dr. Graham, and Elder Luana Shirt. They will be speaking on topics of healing from trauma and reducing addictions. So we're going to follow a similar style to the last panel, where we'll be having the panelists present for 5 minutes, and then followed by a Q&A period. So first up, Dr. Goodwill, please.
Miigwech, Alanese Onishin Adishnikas, Muskobane Sequin Ishnabe Indishnido, Sandy Bay Donji. I'm from Sandy Bay, Ojibwe First Nation, and I am currently situated on Scout-Kale First Nation as part of the Stalo Territory in Chilliwack, BC. I'm a registered psychologist and an assistant professor in counseling psychology at Simon Fraser University. It's an honor to be here today. I've got a hot 5 minutes to talk about how the heck to heal trauma and reduce addictions. And this is not something that I entered into by choice. This is definitely a field that chose me. I'd like to share my screen now, if that's okay. I have a couple of slides prepared to just organize my thinking. So here we go. So how do we heal trauma and reduce addictions? How can this possibly happen? Especially when it's so close up in our personal lives as Indigenous people. We're all still very much greatly affected by the Indian Act. The Indian Act is in effect, in full force at this moment. And it's personal and systemic and institutional trauma. But trauma isn't anything new, and our people have always been gifted at healing trauma. We have multiple ancient ceremonies, laws, and ways of practicing our sovereignty in order to help us deal with and respond to trauma. And one of these is our clan systems, and each of our Indigenous nations have a clan system or a Dodam system, some kind of network that would help us hold one another together and respond to the different injuries that would arise that would harm and wound us. So many of you introduce yourselves. I hear a lot of my Anishinaabe brothers and sisters in this group introduce themselves by their clan. And that's a good thing, because not all communities have their clan system intact. And I would say that my community of Sandy Bay First Nation does not have a clan system intact. There is going to be a knock on my door, and I'm going to ignore it, so I hope it doesn't bother you. Anyways, if you're an Anishinaabe person and you want to know what your clan is, you actually have to go and seek healing for this and seek someone who's gifted at being able to tell you which clan you belong to. And having that sense of belonging and having that role and purpose to drive your life is part of, and also that cohesion is part of how we reduce and heal trauma, in my opinion, and reduce addictions. So I was always really interested in violence, and that's mostly because of my personal experiences with violence. I was really tired of seeing my nieces and nephews get recruited into gangs. They were from really good cultural families, and I knew it wasn't just the cultural story. I didn't understand what was going on. And this is kind of part of the very Eurocentric narrative, which is like, let's blame parents and let's blame 9-to-5 helping systems as to why our kids are going into gangs. And this is a very narrow way of looking at how gangs and trauma are interconnected also with addictions. And they really are presenting themselves in our communities, and something that I wanted to talk about and I've done research on in the past. So I'm not saying I agree with this slide, but this is something that gets posited towards us. And I would actually like to present this instead. Looking at the effects of trauma being something that affects our development. So this is, some funny lines that we look at to kind of explain how child development gets affected by maltreatment and trauma that does happen to our children and our family members as a result of Indian Act genocidal policies. But here's another way of looking at what our developmental milestones would be. In these 4 domains of self, family, community, culture, and spirituality, there are several things that we can invoke to reduce addictions and heal from trauma. And many of these things have to do with, attending and participating in our culture, having spiritual experiences, having good role models, seeing good representations of our people, helping our people, and then also reducing those disconnections that we have from our families. There are multiple levels of disconnection that our people experience as a result of the genocidal policies that we live under with the Indian Act. And then, of course, the domain of the self, which individual psychology is so obsessed with. It's one very narrow way in the door, but it's something that gets a lot of attention in trauma repair psychology. But I think it's really important to mention family, community, culture, and spirituality domains when talking about healing from trauma and addictions. So the last thing I want to end off with, I don't know if I have a minute left or 30 seconds left, but I just want to talk about the pictures here. The right picture is a rendering of the Moose Mountain Medicine Wheel in Nakota Territory. It's in southeastern Saskatchewan. And there are a number of earthworks like these, and they're diminishing due to theft, vandalism, and agriculture. There are about 170 medicine wheels left in Canada. There are actual photo images of the Moose Mountain Medicine Wheel, which is about 7,000 years old, but I didn't want to use it because Indigenous laws forbid taking photographic images of sacred sites. So you have this, this rendering here on the right. But for the purposes of discussing the importance of earth-centered epistemology in healing trauma and addictions, I will use the image to contrast with the one on the left. So the one on the left is a text-based medicine wheel. It's used for different kinds of ways of doing wellness planning, health planning in Indigenous counseling centers or counseling approaches. But I think that it's really important to note the contrast. So instead of navigating the stars and our land and having access and free access to our land through using the medicine wheel on the right, we're now trying to navigate what has happened to our bodies, what has happened to our experiences as a result of land restriction. So no longer can we roam freely throughout our own lands, wayfinding with our astronomical knowledge. The cultural genocide and destruction we endured since the invasion now restricts us to paper, borrowed concepts and epistemologies that restrict our mobility. But the place beyond coping is to move into and reclaim our spaces, places, and lands. So that's how I end on a positive. I know that that was one of the teachings shared here today. But that's all I have prepared for you today, Miigwech.
Thank you, Dr. Goodwill. That was really insightful. We'll now move into Dr. Graham, please.
Good afternoon, and I just want to acknowledge I'm coming from Treaty 6 territory. I'm a member of the Central First Nation, Plains Cree, assistant professor in the College of Nursing here at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm a nurse, and I'm also a registered doctoral psychologist. In my practice, I specialize with trauma and PTSD, so it was really interesting when Dr. McCormick was talking about healing from animals. One of the somatic-based therapies that I use in my practice is somatic experiencing. Dr. Peter Levine actually started that research, and he talked exactly what Dr. McCormick talked about animals trembling after a near-death experience and whatnot. And so some of that work with somatic experiencing has actually moved to some laws in California where paramedics first on site is if someone's trembling or shaking, instead of trying to stop them, is actually encourage them to further discharge that. So it is interesting how this these teachings from animals is making its way into some of our psychological first aid interventions. I feel very fortunate, like what Dr. Goodwill mentioned. I didn't choose this field, it chose me, and I think those of us, you've had, my mother was in the residential school, as all our family was on that side. So it's just when you think about this topic, it's about we have to heal ourselves first. And it's a very unique and probably different journey for everyone. I was fortunate to be raised in culture, even though my mother was in residential school. My mother's fluent in Cree, but didn't raise us to speak Cree because she wanted us to not have an accent and to be able to do well in school. So when I think about my Cree name is Lukamathixwo, which I started dancing in sun dances when I was 7, and it means to bring peace and happiness to those around you. So as we know, our Cree names give us this position, this direction, lays out our journey in terms to living up to it. So for me, that's been a very real part of my my own journey, is my own healing and the continued healing. I've been fortunate to spend time with some elders, and they really talk about healing as really important, as it's our time to reconnect and to reclaim our own indigeneity and to be proud of who we are as Indigenous peoples. And that is a real strong key theme I've heard throughout previous presentations. So most of my lectures and speaking engagements, I talk about adverse childhood experiences. We want to mitigate those. I talk about trauma-informed care. You know, just it's really about giving control back to the individual, removing those oppressive forces of making decisions for other peoples and whatnot. So in terms of my research, it's all been strength-based. There's a couple of, about 3 initiatives right now that I'm working on that I wanted to share. One is I partnered with Carlin Nordstrom and working with land-based, basically their youth wellness camps. So we actually take the youth from a particular First Nation community, and then we take them to, we have a couple sites in the province where they learn traditional skills of hunting, skinning, trapping, preparing the meat, cooking. We have elders who actually talk about the history, and we also do interactive games, which they're talking about healthy boundaries, you know, using hula hoops and practicing scenarios. So really looking at enhancing and building resilience. And we've received money from the National Indian Brotherhood to work with one of the inner city organizations, the White Buffalo Youth Lodge in Saskatoon, to do some of those trips. Another one of the initiatives I'm working on, which is through public safety, it's really well funded, a huge grant, and it's crime prevention. And it's called ON-NEIHR with Teethawin, which is Cree helping Cree. And the goal of it is really to reduce current rates of Indigenous incarceration. So we're working with youth who are really from age 10 to 19 and their families, and it's all about reclaiming culture. So actually 2 elders came to me and asked me to write the grant 2 years ago, and it's taken 2 years to actually get the funding in place. And so they were both in the residential school with my mother, which when we talk about Wakotwa and how we're related and interconnected, feel very humbled for them to come to me and to ask me to work with them. And so Wakotwin is one of the concepts of interrelatedness, interconnectedness, which I've heard others talk about, our connection to land. We can't separate this for our wellness. So many of these traditional concepts will be reintroduced to the families and to the youth. And one of the things that we're going to be teaching in the schools is really traditional circles. It's we bringing back our traditional restorative justice approaches when there's conflict. So using our traditional, bringing families together, elders, and really looking at what is the problem and then problem solving together. And so I'm really excited. We're calling them traditional circle practices, but part of this grant, it's nestled and within crime prevention. So it is within the justice system. So that is something that I'm really interested. We're starting actually just this month. And the other thing is just really looking at a wellness plan in another community. And that's one of the initiatives I'll be doing with the funding from this ON-NEIHR grant, is working with community to co-create a holistic wellness plan. I do want to say, in terms of our animals and listening to them, my grandfather used to tell me, you listen to the animals, they'll talk to you. And I remember being a little girl sitting on his knee and thinking, isn't that magical? And then, you know, we go to school and I was taught that many of the things that I believed were basically there was no science behind them. There was no science to back up our teachings. And so it's really interesting. I've taken courses on interspecies animal communication from non-Indigenous people who have actually are teaching and talking about some of the concepts mentioned here, like talking to trees, hugging trees, the fact that they are connected to Mother Earth and they have natural negative ions, so they're actually very healing and whatnot. When I lived in the States, when we came back to Canada, we'd been living there for 3 years, and my son was crying the last 3 days before we left, and he said, Mommy, I'm gonna miss my tree. So he had actually adopted one of the trees in the backyard of the apartment where we lived, and he would actually go sit in that tree and talk to that tree. And he had such a connection to that tree, you know. And so when we look at our children, even naturally how they address their healing and, you know, how they feel inside their hearts. So I think that for me, really culture and that exposure to the spirit world, how we see the spirit, that we are the spirit, it is in this, it's in everything. I think one of the challenges, though, is sharing our conceptualization of spirit when we're looking at non-Indigenous peoples who have different conceptualizations, and more often from a religious perspective. I'm going to stop there because I'm probably really close to my time, but I have much gratitude for being invited and being a part of this. So hi.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. I love the diversity and interdisciplinary work that you do. Yes? I
was going to say one more thing I'm working on with the Faculty Association within our collective agreement is I'm working to have our ceremony, the 10 ceremony, actually covered under wellness days. So this is something, you know, kind of looking at structural change within academia and looking at strength-based, so that we are given that protected time to go out into community. So sorry about that, Riley.
No problem. It's amazing, all the work that you're doing. So now we'll have a presentation from Elder Luana Shirt.
Ani Bojo Kinawea. Can you hear me? Okay, let's see now. Wase Joming going to Indigenous cause, Bijon Dodium, Niso Mede Koyandao, Mede Wana Koyandao, Nihil Skoil Nishnabe Koyandao. Aurelia Megwa Nindinda Oma, Saddle Lake Nindunjaba. I am Luana Jaganashi Noswin. Let's see, my spirit name is Light Smiling Woman, and I am of the Lynx clan. And I'm originally from Treaty 6, where these ladies, these amazing women are from Holly, Dr. Holly Graham and Miss Dr. Goodwill. Yeah, I don't know why I'm sitting here listening to everybody's incredible presentations, and you know, they're all interrelated. Everything's interrelated, from the land-based to the addictions and the trauma. you know, and that's what it's all about. I wanted to start off by saying that one of my very first teachers is my mother, Miss Snuneymuxw, and she's not here today. She's not on Zoom today. But the other one I wanted to acknowledge was Badwe Wadan Benesi Ba, Eddie Benton Benet, the one who passed away 2 days ago. He, you know, as a young woman, I was supposed to go to Europe, and I've known Eddie and Anabanase, Jim Dumont, all these amazing teachers and leaders in our lodge from when I was young. And so I sat down at ceremonies one time, and I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to Europe, and I'm going to go and take some courses there, and you know. But they said they looked at me and said, okay, you need to just take it back, because it's once you cross that water, you change. There's something that changes about you. And as I got older, I understood that what he was talking about. It's about knowing yourself, about knowing who you are. Ajode Gi Kendasawin, knowing who we are. And that is what my life has been about, knowing who I am, and as a Nihiosquea, as a Anishinaabe, and what I do in this community and how I work in this community of Simcoe County. So there's 3 things that I'm working on right now. One of them is a curriculum, and it's to do with the 13 moon system. And we're working with educators, bringing together the knowledge of what that 13 moon system is, and how it, how we can, how we move through those cycles. And so I had a PowerPoint, but my internet, I don't know what's going on with my system. So I'm just going to talk. So the 13 moon system curriculum, it talks about our relationship to our mother, the earth, and our Nokomis Debikizis, our grandmother, and how we move with the cycles of life. And you know, everyone has talked about something related to that cycle with their presentations. You know, our clan systems, the water security, those sacred sites, how we connect. That's our Anishinaabe Nindam. That's our knowledge, eh? That's who we truly are. Ajode Gi Kendasawin. This is something that I see as Anishinaabe. We struggle with this, right? We struggle with that balance between that what the academic world puts out, and our own beautiful teachings. And so I've been learning in a teaching lodge, the Three Fires Society, almost all my life. And so I'm 3rd degree in that lodge. And so I do have some knowledge on how to speak to spirit and those teachings. You know, I listened with my indigenous mind, and you know, and that's related to that indigenous heart. They're very connected, eh? That balance between those two. So the 13 moon curriculum, it is based on it works with our children at a young age, giving them that confidence, giving them the know-how and that language. It's really, really important. Our indigenous languages, just a little bit about that too, is about 4 years ago, I went to a college and I took a Anishinaabe program, learning the language from the foundation, right from the foundation. And it was scary. it was scary because my mother is a fluent Cree speaker, but I knew I had to take this Indigenous foundational program, and I swear I was like it kind of just like stripped away so much, you know, but it's building me up now. From that, knowing that foundation has given me more confidence about my relationship and how to speak to that mino mashkike, that those good medicines, learning about breaking those words apart and finding the root systems and finding those stories. And that's the other part of that second thing that I'm working on, is looking at the medicines, the 4 medicines that we need to know as Anishinaabe people. Those 4 medicines are those the sweetgrass, sage, cedar, and tobacco. On Turtle Island, they say that we need that relationship has to be it's ongoing. So what I do with the women in this community through this COVID time, we sit in a circle, and every circle we work with those medicines. It's very simple. It's a very simple thing, but it's also very scary for a lot of them because the circle that I work with is these women are from you know, it's a transitional homes and addiction. So they it's building them up with that mashkiki, getting them to work with the relationship of tobacco. What do we do with tobacco? How do we grow it? How do we harvest it? How do we share it? Why are we sharing it? These are all the things that we have. Again, it's that Anishinaabe Nindam that we need to know these. Then it's about confidence. It's about that confidence and working with that medicine. And everything that everyone's doing here, that's what we should be learning and teaching. Is that medicine, that tobacco comes first. But the other one is that leads me to that other part is the 1 minute left is the bundle. We're creating bundles for our communities, and we're creating medicine bundles for our elders during this COVID time. We're picking the medicines, we're creating, we're using that cedar. It's out right now. We're in that minnow, little spirit moon. We're picking these medicines and creating bundles and giving them to our elders. And that's something, as a traditional person, you know, that's the first thing we did actually when COVID came into our community. So again, I'm amazed at everybody's work. You know, we are doing our part here, and I just want to say miigwech for listening. Hi, miigwech.
Thank you, Luana. That was really inspiring. I love hearing all the teachings. So now we'll move into our Q&A section. We have about 5 minutes for questions and answers. So if you could just type it in the little Q&A box that you have at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions. While I'm waiting, I'll share some personal reflections. This work is so important for our communities. You know, addictions and trauma impacts probably every one of us, and our families, our friends. Personally, I've had family members struggle with addictions, and recently my boyfriend's cousin had passed away from an addictions-related death, which is unfortunate, but I'm happy to see that there's work being done to prevent these from happening anymore, because it is hurtful. And you know, it's kind of funny because it just kind of perpetuates the system of trauma, the cycle of trauma that we experience when our loved ones pass away or experience addictions. So yeah, questions? Yes, Suzanne.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question for, well, it's really for everyone. Everyone could answer it, but I'd like to hear Dr. Graham's response first. And it's really about the somatic experiencing for working with Indigenous clients and patients. And I'm just wondering if you could comment at all about, you know, sort of what that's been like using that. Because because as a Native person, I'm highly damaged, right? From growing up as a Native woman in Canada. So I've myself chosen to go for a lot of therapy in my life to try to deal with my own healing issues. And I did see a somatic experiencing therapist when I lived in BC who had actually trained with Peter Levine and had done all that intensive training. And I think it's really good, but I also see that there can be some issues, particularly when maybe non-Indigenous clinicians are coming in to work with our people with these very specific sort of trauma healing psychological approaches, and just maybe to get your take on some of that, clinically speaking, or however.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Actually, you talk about we're damaged. We've come through this and we feel damaged. And that was actually why I went for therapy about 20 some years ago. And I remember my ex-husband at the time is a chiropractor. And he said, there's this amazing woman. I send my patients to her and she has like a 99% success rate, because often when people have been in car accidents, they don't want to drive after. They can develop PTSD depending on the severity of the MVA. And he says, but she doesn't do traditional talk therapy. So I went to see her and I just found it so remarkable. And what she did is EMDR. So personally, eye movement desensitization reprocessing is so faster than SE. I use somatic experiencing when I have a very dysregulated central nervous system that I'm uncertain to the degree of disassociation and whether there's been fractures or different parts of personalities have emerged. So I will start with SE. If I don't know that person's central nervous system, like you get this intuition. And once I've been able to stabilize, when there's a lot of approaches you can do with SE that are very good for connecting and grounding, then I do EMDR. So I used EMDR and I found it works, both of them work with the reptilian part of the brain, which is the old part of the brain where the fight-flight response is. And that is a very difficult part to access through traditional talk therapy, CBD and narrative and traditional Western approaches, which is why I believe ceremony is really powerful, because it can actually go to that part of the brain. But along with this EMDR, I have found it to be very efficacious with myself being First Nations and looking at my own history of what I went through, and then with clients. And I've worked with many Indigenous First Nations Métis who have said it's unbelievable. I've worked with people who are actually coroners who had nightmares, very different backgrounds, and after the EMDR that has subsided and whatnot. So just that it just works with a different part of the brain. I think what is critical is there's a component when people are experiencing trauma and they're reliving it over and over, is one of the things we do with EMDR, they're called cognitive interweaves. And that's where you create a neural adaptation, so to speak, with a cognitive interweave. So if you're First Nations like myself, having the knowledge of colonization and the history and all the things, so my cognitive interweave would be more culturally appropriate for my relatives, I would assume, than someone who's non-Indigenous. And that may be where some of the miss or lack of understanding or that lack of background of a non-Indigenous practitioner, I could see with that, because my cognitive interweaves become very intimate from my own experience and understanding the context that many of us grew up in. I'll just stop there because I could go on and on about it. I've also taken the EMI, the eye movement integration, which is again using the eyes. So the eyes are actually the window to our souls. And when we store memories, our brain records it perfectly, but we can't always access it. So when you're processing trauma, using the eyes is an amazing, efficacious, quick way.
Indigenous people where I live, the Coast Salish people, they have an expression where they call dreaming yourself into a new existence. And that kind of a repair that can happen through their own healing practices. And it made me think about the training that I got, because I got the EMDR training. I also had the therapy. I had more than 20 hours of EMDR therapy to recover from the violence I experienced and witnessed in my life. And I can't say that I have experienced anything more efficacious. And listening to you talk, Holly, it makes me think there is such a difference between good therapy and bad therapy. And so many of our people get bad therapy, really, really shitty bad therapy. And the reason why our mental health disparities are what they are, and particularly in trauma and addictions, is our inability to access anything that's appropriate, culturally safe, and efficacious, because there's a lot of crap out there. Sorry for be swearing, but maybe it's the whole trauma and addictions theme that brings it out. But just listening to you talk, Holly, our people don't access that. And they don't access that because the field itself is preventing entry of our people to get into that. And in order to get the EMDR training or the SE training or the OEI training, you have to have a master's degree. Yeah. And how easy is it to get a master's degree? First, you have to, get recolonized and also deal with all these levels of separation, being a grad student, and hopefully emerge from that, still Indigenous, still liking, yourself and embracing your own ways of thinking and being. Because I know after grad school, after enduring counseling psychology grad school, you question anything else other than what you were taught in school. And so there's an unlearning that has to happen for years after graduate training. But the good news is, and what I will end on a positive, is for things like this, these networks to exist, they didn't really exist, when I was a student. So the fact that this exists now, and there's like 89 participants in this, there's all these panelists, and we're creating a new discourse. I think that we can really reverse that. And we're seeing other people that look like us and talk like us do the work. And that's so, so important.
Alainez, I just want to pick up on that. My Indigenous clients, one of them went on Facebook and talked about it. And I have such a waiting list now because they'll wait a year to see me to have the EMDR. Yeah. And you're right. I had over 20 hours of work, which is a lot of work for EMDR to get over the stuff.
You need it. Yeah.
Because I saw another non-Indigenous psychologist who had done 20 years of individual therapy on her sexual abuse. Yeah. I saw her for 8 hours, and she said more healing occurred in the 8 hours of EMDR than 20 years cognitive behavioral therapy.
I know. I don't know what it is. Like when I started to practice that modality, I thought this is voodoo strength. Like this is definitely designed for people with PTSD.
And the key thing I think, Alainez, is that with EMDR, the person's brain is the one that brings up the content that's stuck. In traditional relationships in Western kind of psychotherapy, the doctor tells the patient what's wrong. I think it's this, or I think it's that, or have you thought about this? In EMDR, when you're processing, the person's brain will bring up the thought or the feeling, and they'll tell you what has been stuck, what they've been unable to discharge within their central nervous system. So then I, as the practitioner, know what do they need, a cognitive interweave, or what do they need that can help them move, or how do maybe we do a healing. And that's often where I bring in the Indigenous of using land to remove. Let's go to a waterfall. Let's gather this up and take it to the water with the healing. So yeah, it's because the person's brain is what determines the content, and they bring it forth. So then they trust their own brain when their own brain tells them it wasn't your fault. As they'll start to say after a while, I work a lot with sexual abuse, I just realized it wasn't my fault. And when their brain tells them that, they know it's the truth. So
I love this discussion. We're gonna have to move along now. I learned so much. I never thought I would actually learn half of those things throughout my life, but I really enjoyed the discussion that we just had. So now I'll pass it off to Dr. Chantal Richmond from Western University, who's a personal friend and teacher of mine for the student panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you, Riley, for your great moderating, and thank you to Dr. Goodwill, Dr. Graham, and Luana. Thank you very much. That was I have a lot of questions. So I'm gonna book time with you, Holly. Put me on your wait list. So I'm really happy to be here today because we are going to hear from our students. And today we have 4 students. I believe we have another 4 students tomorrow who are going to present the work that they are doing. Outside of my work as a researcher, I'm also the leader of Ontario's Indigenous Mentorship Network. This is a CIHR funded health training grant. Essentially, the big vision here is to train Indigenous people to do Indigenous health research for Indigenous communities. So it's really wonderful. I'm really happy to share that we actually launched our call for scholarships today. I'm going to share that slide later during our thank yous. But we have 4 exceptional presenters today. Brittany McBeth from, sorry, Brittany, I'm saying your name wrong. McBeth from Queen's University, Shannon Peltier from the University of Toronto, Candace Angelo from the University of Sydney. Thank you for waking up early to be with us. And Sarah Ponton, also from the University of Toronto. So I'm actually going to invite our presenters to speak for about 4 minutes. If you could use that time also to introduce yourselves, that would be great. I'm going to set my timer and let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. And we're going to start with Brittany. Welcome, Brittany.
Sego Sewagwego, Nyawagoa for the invitation to speak today. Brittany Jungetz, Macbeth de Waxen Azarde, Gintega Nigidron, Wagata Huni, Dana Ganyukahaga Nikia Dodo. Gadawayasta, Adakarita Tsadzi Queen's University, Dano ON-NEIHR, Gadawayasta Oni. So my name is Brittany Macbeth. I am of mixed ancestry, Mohawk on my mom's side from Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. And on my dad's side, primarily Scottish, hence the last name Macbeth, like the play. And Wolf Clan has passed down from my mom's side, and I'm of the Mohawk Nation. So I'm currently a student studying health promotion under the supervision of Dr. Luce Levesque at Queen's University. And I'm also studying Mohawk language and culture as kind of a more personal endeavor. And I guess I'm going to follow the questions that were provided to us. So I'll tell you a bit about what brought me to the field of Indigenous health research. And so originally, it was embedded in family. And so within my family, my grandfather, my dada, just recently passed away of complications of type 2 diabetes, which definitely runs in my family, and I'm also at risk. And so I wanted to work with people, but more specifically, I wanted to be able to give back to my community in Tyendinaga. I wanted my education to benefit that community specifically, and not just anyone, because they supported me so much in my academic journey as well. But I should also mention that I was born in Toronto, Ontario, and grew up in the Greater Toronto area in various cities around there, and I'm currently residing in Belleville. So I grew up as an urban Indigenous person, very disconnected from community, very disconnected from culture as well. And it was coming to a colonial institution that I started to learn more about myself. And so my education has really just been a journey of self-discovery. And in that way, my current research is very, very heavily tied to myself personally. And as we all know, it can be very emotional work as well. And so I guess in my undergrad, I completed my arts degree in psychology. And everybody in the psychology program wanted to do clinical psychology, so did I. And then I learned about occupational therapy, which was another kind of professional program. And so I started looking more into that. And all of these programs had a very linear path, because you would kind of do that program and then you would look for a job wearing that hat, wearing that position. And so I never really knew what a research-based master's, where that would lead me. It was kind of more scary, I think, because of the possibilities, and it was kind of more open-ended. But it was my involvement at the Indigenous Student Center that led me to meeting my current supervisor. I used to work for their Right to Play program, the Kingston chapter, which was a Play for Diabetes Prevention project. And so in this role, I planned and facilitated play-based and culturally based programming for youth that that promoted holistic health and wellness for the youth that were in the program. And through this, I met my supervisor, Dr. Levesque, because of my involvement and her research in kind of positive youth development within Indigenous communities and the health promotion background as well. So I ended up doing a master's with her. She opened my eyes to the possibilities of doing a research-based master's. And I also chose the pathway as opposed to that more linear pathway through a professional program because I knew I'd be able to explore a little bit and I'd be able to customize it as well to align with that journey of self-discovery that I was on myself. So the current research projects that I'm working on, I'm involved with the Ganawage Schools Diabetes Prevention Project, their community mobilization training, which focuses on evaluating the effects of a training workshop that guides communities through a strategic planning that mobilizes them all together for the prevention of type 2 diabetes. And so a lot of things come up in these trainings. It's definitely not restricted to just type 2 diabetes. It really depends on the priorities of the community and the context and the needs and the strengths of each community as well. So that's one part. And then I've just started a research assistant position with the Smithsonian Institute, their language revitalization initiative, which is in partnership with the Multicultural Initiative for Community Advancement. And so this project is very similar in that, oh, my time is up. And so it's very similar in that it mobilizes communities around language revitalization. Yes, so thank you very much. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Brittany. We will have time for questions. I'll make sure. So thank you very much for that. We love hearing about your journey. We're now going to hear from Shanna Peltier, please.
Hello, Ani. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces here today. I'm so proud to have been asked to come and speak really quickly. And so, like Chantal said, my name is Shanna Peltier. I am an Anishinaabe from McCormick unceded territory, which is located on the beautiful Manitoulin Island here in Ontario. I am currently a PhD student working under the supervision of Dr. Jeffrey Anselus in the School and Clinical Child Psychology program. So Brittany, I went with the clinical path to grad school from the undergrad in psych at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. When I think about my beginnings in the world of Indigenous health research, I often find myself reflecting about growing up on reserve and then having to move away to pursue post-secondary education. I think about the love I have for my community and our communities, the accountability I feel to do right and enact justice on behalf of Indigenous peoples from within the context of Indigenous health research. I think I both chose to situate myself in this research world, but I also think I was carefully selected and recruited into Indigenous health research by the various mentors that I've had for my perspective, my lived experiences, and my passion. To start this section on my research work, I wanted to acknowledge that suicide or instances of suicidality has likely touched many of our lives. To the public, Indigenous suicide is often framed as a crisis and a tragedy. I don't necessarily see this framing as wrong, but at the same time, I reflect on the colonial conditions of living or surviving we as Indigenous peoples find ourselves in, where crisis is often normalized and tragedy has become part of our story as people. And as such, I'm currently engaged in work that seeks to generate more complex theories of Indigenous suicide and suicidality, moving away from discourses that center suicide as the result of an individual pathology, or more commonly talked about in terms of a mental illness. This framing often warrants individual-based responses or interventions that are usually claimed by the disciplines of psychology and psychiatry. It is in my view that these interventions into mental health continue to turn a blind eye to structural violence that may be contributing to making life feel unlivable for Indigenous people. Therefore, I'm moving towards theories of suicide that account for political, social, economic, historical, colonial dimensions. I'm approaching this goal by centering the voices and expertise of Indigenous youth as a starting point for more creative and life-promoting approaches to suicide prevention. Asking questions that are not interested in safeguarding institutions and taking a more politicized, socio-historical and justice-focused approach to suicide prevention. Indigenous youth are knowledgeable, they're strong, and they know what needs to change in their realities and on these lands to make living feel good. The goal is to implicate structural change and put forward theories of decolonization as potential means to foster a thriving and livable experience for Indigenous youth in Canada. And being here today, hearing all of these different presenters, I feel that being a part of this network of scholars is so extremely valuable to addressing the challenge of suicide in a way that's interdisciplinary and that centers Indigenous knowledges and lands and voices. And so what I intend to do with my future, such a very chill question to ask. Following my studies, I intend to abolish oppressive and colonial structures, but that might take a while. So in the meantime, I'm hoping to continue down the path of academia, but in a way that keeps me accountable to my community. You know, saying I want to be a prof feels a little interesting as somebody who can barely even say that they're a PhD student without feeling weird about it and like uncomfortable. But I also will be able to register as a psychologist at the end of my journey. So for what it's worth, I'll have those letters behind my name too. Honestly, it's at times hard for me to feel pride in this title, given some of my experiences in grad school, as the psych discipline tends to talk about Indigenous peoples in this often very damage-centered or pathologized way. But mostly I'll be engaging in work that promotes life, uplifts Indigenous youth, and integrates systems. Chimigwech.
Awesome. You did that with 3 seconds to spare. So congratulations. Thank you, Shanna. You're such a bright shining light. We're really proud of everything you're doing. Thank you for that. We are now going to turn to our friend who's many, many miles away, Candace Angelo. Thank you very much. It's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. G'day, everybody. I would like to start, as we do in Australia, in Aboriginal communities, by acknowledging that I'm zooming you from Yagle country up in the beautiful northern New South Wales. So for any of you who aren't familiar with Australia, Yagle country is quite close to Byron Bay. So who am I? I am Candace Angelo. I'm a First Nations Yuin woman from south coast of New South Wales in Australia. My family have been impacted by the White Australia policy, which forcibly removed Aboriginal children from their families and adopted them into Caucasian families, or placed them into orphanages in an attempt to breed the black out of them, essentially. The idea was to diminish blood quantum. Still today, as a fair-skinned Aboriginal woman, I'm often asked what quantum I am. Are you half caste? Are you quarter caste Aboriginal woman? As an Aboriginal woman, we find that quite offensive, and we don't compare ourselves in blood quantum, but this was an attempt by the government to diminish our Aboriginality. So this generation of people, which is my mother's generation and my grandmother's generation, are known as the stolen generation, and it's talked about quite widely within Australia at the moment. Government have apologised for this and claimed that this was a mistake. However, many people made their way back to their mob. So a mob is what we refer to our Aboriginal friends and family. It's also coincidentally the name of a group of kangaroos. But many did not find their way back to their family. Unfortunately, following on from the stolen generation, there is a generation of people which is not widely discussed, and this is the hidden generation. So the hidden generation are a group of people who had to hide their Aboriginal heritage and ethnicity out of fear for removal and fear of the government. So many Aboriginal people lived for almost their whole lives being told that they were of another ethnicity, such as Italian or Spanish, in an attempt to hide their true identity. And it's only as elders have passed away that they've told their family members. So there's multi-layered trauma within the Aboriginal community. So beyond that, I'm a wife and I'm a mother of 2 boys. I'm a registered nurse, so I work in the space of rural and remote health. So I live in quite a small community. I've been working as a registered nurse for quite a lot of years in management and leadership roles, and as the only Aboriginal nurse in my hospital, I sort of feel quite a sense of pride in the work that I do. It's creating a bridge between, I suppose, Aboriginal people and mainstream community members. So just having me there is welcoming other Aboriginal people into the mainstream health services. I have more recently, in the last 5 years, moved into a role as an Aboriginal academic and lecturer at the University of Sydney. So I lecture in 3 programs. One of them is the Graduate Diploma of Indigenous Health Promotion. Another one is the Graduate Diploma of Indigenous Health Promotion, Social and Emotional Wellbeing. As we know, mental health is an emerging theme, and trauma is greatly impacting on physical health. So I also lecture in that stream of the Graduate Diploma. And thirdly, I also lecture in the Masters of Public Health as an Aboriginal academic lead. So I'm also a Master of Philosophy student. So I'm a student at the University of Sydney Faculty of Medicine within this wider School of Public Health. And my supervisor is my mentor and an inspiring Aboriginal health leader, Dr. Michelle Dixon, who will be speaking tomorrow. So my research is in the space of Indigenous workforce. So I'm really fascinated by the amount of Aboriginal people that enter the workforce but burn out very quickly. We find that there's a lot of institutional racism and people are just not staying in the workforce. So I'm fascinated to see what we can do in that space to ensure that we're nurturing Aboriginal people to become health leaders of the future. I guess my thesis title is Enhancing Culturally Safe, Appropriate and Accessible Health Service to Improve the Outcomes for Aboriginal Community Members by not only increasing but nurturing and retaining the health workforce. So I'm looking at whether or not mentoring in the workplace will nurture our Aboriginal health workers to continue on in health and almost progress their career, because we're finding that the government sets targets for employment. So what a lot of workplaces are doing are employing people at the lowest pay scale. And I would really love to see Aboriginal representation in health at all levels of health service. So that's where my research lies. And I'm really passionate about ensuring that we are nurturing Aboriginal people into all health services and ensuring that mainstream health are also inviting of Aboriginal people into those services. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's really exciting to be a part of this and to hear about all the amazing work being done in Canada. We often, in our public health space at the University of Sydney, sort of say, look over the bridge, peep over the fence and have a look at what Canada are doing, because you are 10 steps ahead of us and we're just trying to keep up. So congratulations on everybody on all your amazing work.
Wow, miigwech. Thank you very much, Candice. That was really wonderful. And in all your roles that you made the time to come and share with us, we really are very appreciative. So thank you and good luck in all of your work. We are going to have more Australian input. I shouldn't say that. More voices from Australia tomorrow. So come back again tomorrow. But before that, we're going to hear from Sarah. Sarah Ponton is a master's student at the University of Toronto, and she's the last on our panel, on our Indigenous Health student panel. Thank you for joining us, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Sarah Ponton. I'm doing my master's at Taualii and the Master's of Science in Community Health, focusing on addiction and mental health. I also have my BA in psychology. That seems to be a common thread. Yeah, so I decided to switch into public health because I saw the value of more of a top-down kind of approach to health, especially mental health and addiction. And I got involved in Indigenous health quite recently. I'm working with Suzanne on a project for ON-NEIHR. We're working with Native Child and Family Services, and that's been really interesting. And yeah, so most of my research so far has been in psychology and looking at not looking at like health, but from a more like social psychology standpoint. So this is the first time I'm doing more in-depth, like fully health-focused research. And yeah, I don't have as much to say as everyone else, but I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Sarah, we're happy to have you. And I just want to remind everybody, I'm just going to share my screen quickly because we, as I mentioned, we have launched our scholarships today, and I think this includes many who are here today. And I know that we're going to have a few. Maybe we should have a few moments for questions first. I was looking through the Zoom, not the Zoom, yes, the Zoom. Sorry, I'm trying to do 3 things at once right now. And it's going badly. Okay, are there questions? I was looking briefly through the, chat, and I don't see any specific questions for students. So maybe I will ask Sarah, if that's okay. If you could talk a little bit about where you see your research going.
Yeah, So I hope, so the project I'm working on now is a program evaluation, like I said, for Native Child and Family Services. And I hope to be involved in more research about that because I find it's very valuable in that the services that are often provided aren't culturally sensitive and there's many barriers to care. And that's a very important thing for me. I want to make healthcare, especially mental health care, very accessible for people. And so I'm hoping that further research and working on this project will help me kind of achieve that goal and give more insight into that.
That's great. I wonder if we can also hear maybe from the panelists about, you know, Shanna, you said that you're gonna like dismantle the system. So can you talk a little bit maybe about role modeling and the importance of role modeling in Indigenous health scholarship and like in research more generally, and especially for community?
Oh yeah. Like role modeling in terms of the types of supervisors that we're going into or the types of projects to get involved with.
I'm thinking about like just being a part of like this network, for example, and seeing inspirational speakers and people who, you know, like the goal is, I think, to see Indigenous people taking over Indigenous health research.
Yeah, and so I've been involved in different outreach programs for Indigenous students wanting to pursue graduate school for a very long time. I think I was actually at an undergraduate gathering hosted by Western University many, many years ago. And so I think about how important it was to have these opportunities provided to me in terms of me being able to actually see and connect with Indigenous scholars who are really enmeshed in this world, because I learned different ways, different things to look out for, different ways of protecting myself, and then also different ways to like undermine the system while also being within the system and creating these little pockets of resistance, which I feel like perfectly defines the way that Indigenous scholarship is happening within institutions, are just these little pockets of resistance in pursuing Indigenous research and really challenging the colonial systems that we're sort of embedded within. But I think that the IMN, the NEIHR, there's the Indigenous Undergraduate Research Scholars Program at McMaster. All of these different places have really formed and created a path for me to see myself walking down.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you, Shanna. I wonder if I can ask Brittany and Candace if you might talk about and share with us about some of the protections that you've had in grad school, and what are the things that you can tell us as mentors that we need to know to support you? We'll start with Brittany.
Yeah, so I think the fact that I could even consider pursuing a research-based master's and then later PhD, an act of resistance is a testament to the work that has been done in the generations before us as current students, as trainees. So there's definitely a lot of work that has been done that has allowed space for students like me to explore and to be allowed to challenge and dismantle these colonial institutions and systems that are governing research. So yeah, those people that have come before us definitely provide those protections as well as that room to grow. And I hope that I can move that forward even more for the next generation in my career. And we've all heard of that transition from research being done for Indigenous communities to now research being done with Indigenous communities, and now even moving further to research done by Indigenous communities. And that, like Chantal, you said earlier, that it ought to move forward the goal of self-determination and sovereignty over our data systems and health research in general and community.
Thank you very much, Brittany. I'm just going to allow Candace the final opportunity, if that's okay, to talk about maybe some of the things that have been protective for you in all the different roles you play and allowing you to come back into your master's.
Yeah. I suppose I totally agree with what Brittany's saying. I think the people that have come before us that are encouraging us, so they've forged the way and lifting us up, I suppose, and encouraging us to be a voice at the table. I've always sort of worked in that space in health where I've sat back and let others speak on my people's behalf. So having people nudging, that nudge theory, little push in the right direction, saying, no, you need to speak, you know, for your people. You need to be the representation of Aboriginal people in your community and step forward and be a leader in that space. So I've definitely been fortunate to have I enrolled essentially in the degree that I now teach into as a byproduct, I guess. I was working on night duty as a manager, seeing that in health, what we were doing with our Aboriginal people was just band-aid fixing. So we're patching them up and sending them away and then they come back. It's just a constant rolling process, which is quite devastating, and we're never getting to the real cause of it. So I stumbled across the degree looking at health promotion, and we know that health is political and that it's always cyclic, and the governments are not that keen on putting huge amounts of funding into prevention because they don't get the accolades at the end of it, because by the time we're seeing the benefits of that, their cycle in government is over and another person is getting the reward. So it's an unfortunate thing, but I thought for my community and to feel like I'm making a difference just as a single person working in the prevention space would have a far greater impact. So I met Dr. Michelle Dixon, who is now quite a leader in my life, and she has said you have the ability to be more than just the Band-Aid fixer. So I've been lucky in that I have had people before me encouraging me. I also come from a family of people who have not finished high school. My mum can't read, so I'm like the first. So I feel quite a sense of pride in being a role model for my children, for my family members, and representing our people. So yes, I totally agree with what Brittany said. Definitely the people that have come before us.
Thank you all. That was brilliant. We love you, we support you, and we just want to see you succeed in your studies. I'm going to thank our student panel, and I'm going to pass it on to Suzanne Stewart to provide some final remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. That was amazingly eloquent and smooth, the way you moderated. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. The way you moderated the student panel and talked about the IMN, and I really think it's important to highlight the importance of the IMN Ontario and the relationship that we at the Ontario-NEIHR have with them, because we're going to be working together for many years and maybe even you know, for forever. Hopefully, that would be great to have this relationship, because I think one of the themes that I heard throughout almost everyone's talk today was really about the theme of relationship, and not just relationship in general, but really the idea of sort of unity and cohesion, because that's been one of the very powerful tools of colonization and of, you know, I don't even like to use words like this because they're even divisive, is the oppressor, but what the policies and the programs of colonial acts of violence have been on us, and that has been to divide and conquer. And those have been very successful in ways, and we see this play out every day, even within our own teams, within our departments, within our groups, within our families, within our communities. And we have to find a way to rise above these things and to be able to work together in ways that are cooperative and not divisive, because really we're just hurting ourselves by doing that. And I know that we're all very committed to being cooperative, because we're all here for the same reasons, and those are those reasons to improve the health and wellness, and to allow us to be able to be who we want to be as Indigenous people, whatever that looks like in the many beautifully diverse ways that we are, and to access our traditional knowing and traditional healing in peaceful ways, that can resolve the issues that we and our communities think are important, and not that are thrusted upon us from non-Indigenous groups, identities, and peoples, and to work together peacefully with those non-Indigenous people and groups who want to support that and want to work with us towards those same goals. So I feel like that's been a really important thing in today's portion of the symposium and gathering, and that will carry us through tomorrow. And I just want to say that, you know, every person has had only 5 minutes, which seemed to be not enough. And because of the constraints of being online and not being able to be together for the whole day, we haven't been able to allow everyone to have an hour to speak. However, there is a way that you can access everyone for a longer hour, and that is all of our NEIHR team members have a 1-hour webinar that we host monthly through the Ontario NEIHR platform. And I know that there are also speaking events that the IMN Ontario holds for its students, which we will highlight in the chat as we go through the rest of today and tomorrow. So please check the Ontario NEIHR website for the webinar dates. We have one or sometimes more a month to ensure that everyone on the team has a chance to do a webinar and that you can get up close and personal with them for an hour or more. So maybe we'll close today, and I wonder if Wendy, if you would like to do a spiritual closing to today, or we should just do our spiritual closing at the end of the event tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I think with a closing, we'll do that tomorrow when we proceed then.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, so just an update that Clayton Shirt and Pauline Shirt won't be able to be here today or tomorrow because they're dealing with one of their leaders' passings. So they've both let me know that they can't be here tomorrow, but that Wendy will be here tomorrow to do the spiritual closing and make any other spiritual remarks throughout the day. So, so we'll close then. We won't be closing, but we will just be saying, I'll see you guys tomorrow at 3 o'clock, same time and place. And it's been a real joy, and I'm feeling a little nervous, so I'm rambling. So thank you everyone for all your contributions today and for all the attendees as well. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to continuing in the same vein with our 2 faculty panels tomorrow, and then our second student panel as well. So Masi Cho, and see you at 3 o'clock tomorrow.